Welcome to the Wellbeing Podcast, where every episode is a step toward a healthier, happier you. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that might surprise you: childhood wounds. You might be thinking, my childhood was pretty good. But what if I told you that even seemingly happy childhoods can leave us with emotional scars? Scars that impact us as adults.
It's true. These inner child wounds, as they're often called, come from unmet needs or difficult experiences. Experiences that we might not even remember consciously, but they can still shape our behaviors, our relationships, and even our physical health.
Okay, so let's unpack this. You shared two really interesting sources with us. One is called Although Many Would Remember Childhood as a Happy Stage.pdf, and it gives a practical overview of these common wounds and tips for healing. The other, The Hidden Ones of Childhood Trauma.pdf, delves into the science behind how trauma, even if it's not physical, can actually impact our bodies.
That's right. What's fascinating is that science is showing us that early experiences, especially those involving stress or neglect, can actually trigger inflammation in the body and brain. And this inflammation, if it becomes chronic, can have long-term effects on our mental and physical well-being.
Wow. So it's not just all in our heads. There's a real biological component. I'm already starting to see how understanding this could be a game changer for a lot of people. Let's dive into these common wounds. One that really jumped out at me from Although Many Would Remember Childhood as a Happy Stage.pdf is the injustice wound. Apparently, this can develop from growing up with overly strict or cold parents.
That makes sense considering what we know about how our brains develop. When children are consistently exposed to harsh or critical environments, it can actually impact the way their brains are wired, making them more prone to anxiety, rigidity, and difficulty regulating their emotions as adults.
So let's say you had a parent who was very strict about rules and never really showed affection. As an adult, this injustice wound might make you inflexible in your work, unable to adapt to new situations, or overly critical of colleagues who don't follow procedures exactly.
Exactly. You might also find yourself constantly seeking approval or validation, always trying to prove your worth, because deep down you might still carry that feeling of not being good enough. And here's where the science of inflammation comes in. This constant state of stress and anxiety can actually trigger that inflammatory response, making you more susceptible to both mental and physical health problems.
That's incredible. It's like these childhood experiences create a ripple effect that impacts so many areas of our lives. Before we go further, can we break down inflammation just a little bit more? I think some people might not be familiar with how it works and why it's so important.
Of course. In a nutshell, inflammation is your body's natural response to injury or threat. Think about when you cut your finger. It gets red, swollen, and a little bit painful. That's inflammation at work, helping to heal the wound. But when we're constantly exposed to stress, whether it's emotional stress from childhood experiences or even lifestyle factors like poor diet or lack of sleep, our bodies can get stuck in a state of chronic inflammation.
And that chronic inflammation is what can lead to those long-term health problems we were talking about.
Precisely. It's like having a fire constantly burning in your body, slowly damaging your cells and tissues. And it's been linked to everything from heart disease and diabetes to depression and anxiety.
And this is all starting to make so much sense. So it's not just about our emotional well-being, it's about our physical health too.
Okay, let's get back to these childhood wounds. There are 5 main ones, right?
Yes. Although Many Would Remember Childhood as a Happy Stage.pdf outlines 5 common wounds: abandonment, rejection, humiliation, betrayal, and that injustice wound we just talked about. All right, so we've got a lot to unpack. It seems like each of these wounds could lead to some pretty distinct patterns and challenges in adulthood. I'm curious, what are some other ways these wounds might show up in our lives? Beyond just being rigid or seeking approval.
That's a great question. And it's important to remember that everyone's experience is unique. But in general, these wounds often manifest as relationship problems, difficulty trusting others, low self-esteem, or even self-sabotaging behaviors. They can also lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse, overeating, or workaholism.
It's almost like we're trying to numb or avoid the pain of those early wounds, but it ends up creating even more problems in the long run.
Exactly, and it's not our fault. These patterns are often unconscious, deeply ingrained in our nervous systems from those early experiences. But the good news is that once we become aware of them, we can start to heal and create healthier patterns. That's the key right there, awareness. Awareness is the first step. And speaking of awareness, let's dig a little deeper into some of these other wounds. Although many would remember childhood as a happy stage.pdf, highlights abandonment and rejection. as two very common wounds that often go hand in hand.
Okay, so abandonment. I'm guessing that comes from literally being abandoned or neglected as a child.
It can, but it's not always that extreme. Sometimes it's more subtle, like having a parent who is emotionally unavailable or who prioritized work over spending time with you.
So it's about that feeling of not having your emotional needs met, of feeling unseen or
Oh,
unimportant.
exactly. And as adults, this can lead to a deep fear of being abandoned again. You might become clingy in relationships, constantly seeking reassurance, or you might go the opposite direction and push people away before they can hurt you.
That makes me think of the anxious avoidant attachment styles I've read about. Could that be connected to the abandonment wound?
Absolutely. Attachment theory really helps us understand how those early childhood experiences shape our relationship patterns. Someone with an abandonment wound might develop an anxious attachment style, always worrying about being left, or an avoidance style, keeping people at a distance to protect themselves from getting hurt.
Wow, this is really starting to connect the dots for me, and I'm guessing rejection kind of goes along with abandonment.
Definitely. Rejection often stems from experiences of not feeling accepted or loved for who you are. It could be from parents, caregivers, or even peers. Think back to your school days. Were you ever bullied or excluded from a group?
Oh yeah, I definitely had my share of awkward moments and social struggles. I'm guessing those experiences can contribute to the rejection wound.
Absolutely. Those seemingly small moments can actually have a big impact, especially during those formative years. And as adults, this wound can manifest as low self esteem, a constant need for approval, and a fear of putting yourself out there.
So you might avoid taking risks or going after your dreams because you're afraid of being rejected or criticized.
Exactly. And that fear can be paralyzing, keeping you stuck in a cycle of self doubt and insecurity. And guess what? That constant stress and anxiety can further fuel that inflammation we talked about,
Mhm.
impacting your overall well being.
It's like this vicious cycle. Okay, so we've got abandonment and rejection. What about those other two ones? Humiliation and betrayal.
Well, humiliation, as you might guess, often comes from experiences where you were made to feel ashamed or ridiculed. Maybe you were publicly embarrassed by a parent or teacher, or you were constantly criticized for your appearance or abilities.
Ouch, yeah. I can see how that would be incredibly painful, especially for a child. How might that play out in adulthood?
Well, people with the humiliation wound might be very sensitive to criticism, have difficulty accepting compliments, or constantly put others' needs before their own. They might also struggle with setting boundaries or asserting themselves for fear of being shamed or rejected.
It's almost like they're trying to make themselves invisible to avoid drawing attention to themselves.
Exactly. And that can lead to feelings of resentment and a sense of not being truly seen or appreciated.
Okay, and what about betrayal?
Betrayal often comes from experiences where someone you trusted broke that trust, whether it was a parent, a friend, or a romantic partner. It could be something as blatant as infidelity or as subtle as not keeping a promise.
So it's about that feeling of being let down, of having the rug pulled out from under you.
Yes. And as adults, this wound can make it difficult to trust others. You might be suspicious of people's motives, have trouble letting your guard down, or even sabotage relationships because you're afraid of being hurt again.
So all of these wounds in their own way are about that feeling of not being safe,
Uh-huh.
of not having your needs met.
Yeah.
And it seems like they can all lead to those patterns of anxiety, self-doubt, and difficulty connecting with others that we were talking about.
That's a great observation. And what's really important to understand is that even though these wounds might have originated in childhood, they can continue to impact us throughout our lives if we don't address them.
So what can we do? Is there a way to heal these wounds and break free from these patterns?
Absolutely. And that's where, although many would remember childhood as a happy stage.pdf really shines, it offers some really practical and insightful strategies for healing.
Okay, this is what I've been waiting for. Let's dive into those healing strategies.
The first step, and this is crucial, is acknowledging the pain. It's so tempting to minimize or dismiss those childhood experiences, to tell ourselves, it wasn't that bad, or other people have had it much worse.
Oh, I'm totally guilty of doing that. I think it's a way of protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
But it also prevents us from truly healing.
Exactly. So the first step is to be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to feel those emotions that might be coming up. Remember, you don't have to go through this alone. Talking to a therapist or a trusted friend can be incredibly helpful during this process.
That makes sense. It's about validating those experiences
Hmm.
and recognizing that they had a real impact on you.
Precisely. And once you've acknowledged the pain, you can start to connect with your inner child.
Okay, I've heard this term before, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. What does it mean to connect with your inner child.
Imagine yourself as that child you once were. What did they need? What made them feel safe and loved? This is about offering that part of yourself the understanding and care. The understanding and care it might have missed, you can do this through journaling, visualization, or even just talking to your inner child in your mind.
So it's about reparenting ourselves in a way, giving ourselves the love and support we didn't receive back then.
Exactly. And as you do this, you might notice those negative beliefs that stem from those childhood wounds starting to surface. Things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, or I'm always going to be abandoned.
It's like those beliefs become ingrained in us, shaping our thoughts and behaviors, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. And that's why the next step in the healing process is so important. It's about challenging those negative beliefs.
Okay, how do we do that?
It starts with becoming aware of those beliefs and then questioning their validity. Ask yourself, is this belief really true? What evidence do I have to support it?
Yeah.
Where did this belief come from? Often you'll find that these beliefs are based on those early childhood experiences, not on reality.
So it's like we're taking those old tapes that have been playing in our heads for years
Yeah.
and finally hitting the record button
Yeah.
to create a new, more empowering message.
I love that analogy. It's about rewiring those neural pathways, creating new thought patterns that are based on truth and self-compassion. And speaking of self-compassion, that's a crucial element of healing.
I have to admit, I struggle with self-compassion sometimes. It's so much easier to be kind to others
Yeah.
than it is to be kind to myself.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. But remember, self-compassion is not about letting yourself off the hook or ignoring your flaws. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend who is going through a difficult time.
That makes sense. It's about recognizing that we're all human, that we all make mistakes, and that we're all worthy of love and compassion, regardless of our imperfections.
Exactly. And as you practice self-compassion, you'll start to notice that those negative self-talk and self-critical thoughts start to quiet down. You'll be able to forgive yourself for past mistakes and move forward with more confidence and self-acceptance.
This is all so helpful. I'm really starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. We've got acknowledging the pain, connecting with our inner child, challenging negative beliefs, and practicing self-compassion. What else can we do to support this healing journey?
Well, both of our sources emphasize the importance of self-care. And I'm not just talking about bubble baths and face masks, although those can be nice too.
Right. It's about more than just pampering ourselves.
Exactly. Self-care is about making choices that nourish your mind, body, and spirit. It's about setting boundaries, saying no to things that drain your energy, and prioritizing activities that bring you joy and make you feel alive.
So things like spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing creative hobbies, or even just taking some quiet time for yourself to relax and recharge.
Absolutely. And here's where the science comes back in. Remember how we talked about chronic inflammation and its impact on our health? Well, engaging in regular self-care practices can actually help reduce inflammation and boost our overall well-being.
It's like a double whammy. We're addressing those emotional wounds and supporting our physical health at the same time.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that healing is a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs. And it's okay to ask for help along the way. A therapist can provide invaluable support and guidance, and there are also many wonderful books and resources available.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's easy to feel like we have to do this all on our own. But there's no shame in reaching out for support.
Absolutely. And remember, you are not alone. Millions of people are on this journey of healing and self-discovery. And the more we talk about these things, the more we normalize them, and the less power those old wounds have over us.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of myself and the ways those early experiences might still be impacting me today. But more importantly, I feel empowered knowing that I can choose to heal, to rewrite those old stories, and to create a brighter future for myself.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Healing is possible. And as you embark on this journey, remember to be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never give up on your own well-being.
Thanks for listening to the Wellbeing Podcast. Take care, stay inspired, and see you next time.